So today on the Bearded Home Cook, we're knocking out the viewer's choice. I appreciate all the messages and comments. I'm super excited. I think this is very timely because it is fall. We're kind of into that whole Oktoberfest. We're gonna knock out some Schnitzel with a couple of sides. Are you ready? So when we were in Munich, there's a couple of cool things that they do out there. They do a great mashed potato. They do a great sauerkraut with bacon. Reminds me of my Aunt Robin. Loved her sauerkraut. So we're gonna go ahead and start peeling some potatoes. You've seen me in the past use this peeler, which goes side to side because you get nice long strokes on it. Anytime I do anything in the kitchen, if I can save time, I will. And I just feel like this potato peeler gets me where I want to go a lot quicker. I've also got a bowl of water. As you peel your potatoes to keep them from browning, you want to go ahead and put them in that bowl of water. And then when you go to dice the potatoes, you like that, potatoes, then you put the dices back in the water again to keep them from browning. Over on the stove, I've already got a pot of water hot. So we're ready to rock these potatoes. They'll be ready to roll. So as a kid, you probably peeled potatoes over the garbage can, but as you get older and taller, guess what? You don't want to lean over a garbage can. Just lay down some paper towel, ball it all up. You're off to the races. Another cool trick is that when you're getting ready to cut your potato, cut off just like a little half-inch section of the bottom. And now you've got a firm plant for your potato. So as we cut this into planks, we're not worried about losing a finger or another part. Now, if you notice, I'm doing them kind of thin. I'm gonna do these in a 1/4-inch dice. Why? Smaller potatoes cook faster, right? Makes it easy. Why on earth would you want to heat up your kitchen and just basically take more time than you need to with a potato? And here's the other thing. Let me just show you this. When you used to cut up potatoes, you get one this size, you get one this size. This one's cooked in about 8 minutes, this one's cooked in about 12 minutes. If you've ever had lumpy potatoes, this is probably why. Do a nice fine dice, get it into your water until you're ready to go, and I'll show you how fast these suckers come out. So I'm gonna finish up the potatoes, and then we're gonna get ready for some pork. Okay, potatoes are in the bowl. What I didn't mention, and I wanna make this point pretty quick, is I'm using russet potatoes. Russet potatoes are known for being the baking potato. A lot of people like to use Yukon Gold and such. The waxier the potato, the longer you have to cook it, and the more lumpy it could be. If you want that whipped palm puree, I'm telling you, the russet's your friend. So you also notice that I've had the pork out for a little bit. You want to get it close to room temperature, maybe keep it out 45 minutes to an hour before you're going to cut it. Cold meat holds on tight, so we need it to just relax a little bit. So pork schnitzel, it's normally a pork chop. I'm going to find 3 pieces here in the middle, as you can tell by the shape of a pork tenderloin, thick to thin. I'm going to find 3 in the middle that are pretty uniform. And so with a pork chop, those are going to be pretty uniform. The problem is you have to beat it to death to try and turn it into a nice little cutlet or schnitzel. Well, you've got your little mallet, got a flat side, and you've got the jagged side. This is for tenderizing. We don't need to tenderize tenderloin. So if you use the right piece of meat, it's gonna do the right thing for you. Then what I do is I put these 3 pieces into a zipper bag. Seal that bad boy up. If you're doing chicken, same thing. You don't wanna do it on a wood cutting board. However, if you do it on a countertop, put a towel down underneath it and beat on the chicken. So I'm just going to tap away. Gonna give that one a second, and I'm gonna come over to the other one. The other nice part about it in the bag is when you're ready, flip, work the other side. I'll show you the results in a second. Oh yeah, look at that. About 3/8 to 1/2 inch, somewhere in that neighborhood. The thicker it is, the longer you have to cook it. So you run the risk of burning the breading and such. So you want to keep it in a nice thin cutlet style. Shapes are going to vary a little bit based on the meat, of course. That's totally cool. So I've got 3 pieces here. I figure this is enough for 1 to 2 people, depending on how hungry you are. This one's a little smaller, that one's a little bigger. Obviously, this is going to work out perfectly. So now I'm going to go ahead and get all of the ingredients together to go ahead and bread these and get ready to go onto the stove. And I'm going to teach you another little trick. Hang on one sec. Okay, to make life simple, what I've done is I've gotten out some paper plates, and I apologize, this isn't the most eco-friendly recipe there is, but if you're trying to save a little bit of time in the kitchen, because obviously the weather's wonderful, paper plates are a really easy way, especially when you're dealing with flour and different ingredients, to just pick it all up, throw it right into the garbage, and not have a ton of sticky, starchy mess to mess with, okay? Egg does have to go into a real bowl. So first thing is, I've got 2 eggs beaten. I'm just gonna cap that with the exact same amount of water, so about 1/4 cup of each. Yes, this is more than I need to make these small pieces here, but obviously I don't want to have too little. So a little extra egg, a little extra flour, a little extra breadcrumb, not a problem. Pour that in here. Okay. Now, flour doesn't come seasoned. So to give it a nice traditional flavor, what I've got is a teaspoon of coarse salt. I've got a half a teaspoon of garlic powder, and I have a half a teaspoon of paprika. So the flour is the first ingredient to go on the pork, which means it's going to be inside the crust. So this is where all the seasoning is going to get. So we're going to go from the flour to the egg to the breadcrumb. And then I'm going to go back to that plate to have them ready to go into the hot oil. So this is my dry hand. This will be my wet hand. So ultimately we start out in the flour, pat it around. I like to kind of go back and forth a couple of times because sometimes you get those little pieces that you don't get enough flour on, and then the breading just doesn't stick properly. Okay? You could do this with a fork if you wanted to keep your wet hand less wet, but this works. So once I get to the breadcrumb, this is the trick. Spread it on top so that your dry hand doesn't get wet. Now you'll notice I'm just using a plain breadcrumb. I don't do the ones with all the herbs and things like that. Sometimes they could cook a little too hard in a pan. I'm not using panko, though you could. It's just not as traditional. I want to make this a little bit more traditional here, even though I'm using pork loin instead of pork chop. All right, so your dry hand, just go back and forth, pick it up, shake it off. You can still see the color of the meat, which means it's a nice light coating. You don't want to turn this thing into a big bread bomb because then it's just not going to be a schnitzel. All right, so we're going to go ahead, get the next one into the flour, then the egg, then the crumb, and then we're going to fire up the pan. All right, so my hands are still pretty clean, which is kind of cool. So if you're gonna take the egg and pour it down the drain, just make sure you run cold water for a little while. You don't want the egg to cook down there. When we make the mashed potatoes, we're obviously gonna be pouring hot water down the drain. So we wanna go ahead and get that egg to pass all the way through. If you were making a gravy that required flour, you could actually reserve the seasoned flour. We don't need to throw it away. But in this case, it's literally this, into the garbage can we go. So I'm gonna turn us around, get over on the stove, and we're gonna start cooking up this pork. So if you ever watch cooking shows on TV, you hear this phrase, mise en place, mise en place. So I've got a pot with water that's heating. I've got my sauerkraut with bacon and a little bit of the whites from a green onion that I'm going to use to garnish afterwards. I've got my cutlets over here. I've got 3 tablespoons of oil to go in my pan, which is currently warming up. I've got sour cream and dill for the sauce that's also going to go into that pan. I have butter and sour cream over here that are going to go into the mashed potatoes, a little bit different twist. And I have some chicken stock waiting to go as a deglaze just to kind of get that sauce started in the pan. So really everything I need to do is right here within arm's reach. I can step 1 foot this way, 1 foot this way, everything's here. So we're gonna go ahead, get that oil down. As it's heating, we still have our potatoes in water. So pardon me being off screen. Just pouring that into a colander. And here they go. I don't want to do it too early because then the potatoes are sitting out in the air. There's tons of water on them, so I have a few minutes before they need to go into that hot water, and I'll be okay. Obviously, water doesn't salt itself. So as it starts coming up to a simmer, you want to aggressively, like 2 tablespoons, season your water. The potatoes are going to pick that up. That means you have a lot less seasoning to do when you get to the finished product because it's going to be throughout the potato. When you mash it, it's all over, okay? Oil's getting nice and hot. I'm sitting on a medium to medium high, about 6 out of 10, because we don't have on-off switches here. We actually have temperature gauges. And what I don't want to do is cook the exterior of this too quickly, and then the inside is undercooked. Got a nice little sizzle. I can do all 3 in this pan without overcrowding. If you go beyond that, you're going to steam your food instead of brown your food. So keep that in mind. You want some space between all of them. I'll show you that here in just a few. But I'm going to go ahead and start pulling some things together, clean up a little bit more, and then we'll get you nice and close. Everybody's got a little room in there to wiggle. It's a nice light sizzle, nothing crazy going on. Okay, my potato water is up to a nice simmer. I'm going to go ahead, get my potatoes in, go nice and slow. Nobody wants to get burned. And similar to the pork, you want to keep that on a medium-high heat. If you go full blast, it's going to boil over. The starches from the potato come out. It goes everywhere. It makes a big old mess. Because I'm using a non-stick pan, you want to use non-stick tongs. They've got that nice silicone coating on the front. And remember, always check the meat from the direction that you put them in. So we have a nice light golden brown. We're going to take that just a little bit darker, flip these puppies over, check on our potatoes, and start pulling this together. So something I want to show you here, and I have a little rag underneath to make sure I don't drip oil on the floor, is you actually see the browning here. You see the meat here, and it's gone from pink to actually turning a little bit beige, which is what cooked pork looks like. So when you make the flip, you should actually be able to see what the inside looks like it's doing. So you get about 50% on one side, come back for 50%. If you were a little under after you're done, you could just pop them into a 350-degree oven for a few minutes. You'll be right where you need to be. Okay, now I've got both sides. Gorgeous. I'm gonna take these off, put them on a paper towel. I'm gonna put just a little bit of salt on there because you always want to season anything that's been fried. This is a fried Schnitzel. Just a little bit of salt. And then we're gonna cover it with a piece of aluminum foil. We're just gonna lay it on top. We're not gonna pinch it, crimp it, or anything because we don't wanna lose the crust that we have. If you cover it up too much, it's gonna steam the crust and it's gonna get kind of soggy. We wanna maintain a little bit of the heat as we pull the potatoes together because those are almost done and we're gonna hammer this out real fast. So while the potatoes are finishing up, you'll notice that I flip-flopped the pans. So the pan that the cutlets were in is gonna become the saucepan. So I moved it off to the side. I've got a little silicone spatula over here to pull that together. These are getting closer. My masher is right next to it. So now again, I've got all my ingredients that I need for these here, but here, this is an important thing. This masher has small holes and larger holes. So they mash and rice at the same time. The russet potato is gonna break down really easily, but this is a game changer. So if you've got one of those big old ones from your grandmother that just does a big zigzag, you're working 5 times as hard to do the same thing. 15 bucks. Another thing we're gonna do with the potatoes that you do not want to forget, so we're gonna put in a half a stick of butter, as well as a tablespoon of sour cream. So go ahead and melt the butter in advance. If you put cold butter into the potatoes while they're steaming in the pan, you're actually gonna melt the butter, but you're gonna cool the potatoes. We wanna keep these as hot as possible. So melt it in the microwave real quick, have it ready to go. So how do you know the potatoes are done? When you can see all the way through them. So the tongs I'm gonna go ahead and use for the sauerkraut later. Just gonna pick one up, oh gosh. And with the light, I can see all the way through it. So we're ready to go. Have your colander at the ready. You're gonna drain them in the sink, run cold water in the background. Hot water, like boiling hot water in your pipes is not a great idea. And then you're gonna put them back into the pan on the burner, turned off, and pop a lid on. All right, see all that steam coming on? We'll go ahead, do that. Now they're gonna continue to steam, so if there's any little bit that might not be cooked all the way through, it's gonna be cooked all the way through. When we're ready to mash, we'll add the other items in there. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get this burner back on, and we're gonna go ahead and make our pan gravy. As I bring this back up to temperature, so again, we're gonna deglaze here in just a second with that chicken stock. Everything is right here ready to go, including a little rubber spatula to help this come out of here. So I'm gonna use about 1/4 cup of sour cream for the sauce. Obviously, as you ramp it up and make more portions, you're gonna scale this up. I'll have all of that stuff on the website, thebeardedhomecook.com. It's where you're gonna find your recipe. So as the pan gets up to warm, we've still got great bits down in the bottom. So we're gonna put in just enough chicken stock to cover the entire bottom of the pan. And then we know that we're going to need gravy to cover all of the pork. So you wanna go just maybe that tiny bit more than you think you need. And then we can cook it down a little bit to richen the flavors, add our sour cream, add our dill, and we're off to the races. So I'm gonna get that up to a simmer. I'm gonna do that with the dill in it. I'm gonna add the sour cream at the very end. We don't wanna cook it to oblivion. Unfortunately, sour cream, even though it's got a nice tartness to it, if you take it too far, it's not gonna taste good at all. So that's gonna be one of the last things we put in. So while the pan gravy starts to reduce, I'm gonna go ahead, the potatoes have been sitting for a few minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and check and see, oh yeah, we still have tons of steam. So at this point, I'm gonna just get the butter. I keep putting the lid back on. I don't wanna lose any of that steam. And then the sour cream in the pan. At this point, they're ready to mash. So again, with the masher, we're just gonna come down. You could use a hand mixer like your grandmother did. You could use a variety of devices, but I'll tell you, once you find your tried and true, you're golden. These are nice and soft. They're gonna whip up great. So after you've run your masher through a handful of times, grab a spatula, stir them around, and just look, see if there's any bigger pieces. There's a couple right there, which means we've got to run the masher through just a few more times, and then they're gonna be ideal. Okay, they're gorgeous. They're still steaming. Lid goes back on. We've got a few minutes before we're gonna plate, so let's keep these nice and warm. They're gonna be perfect. So with the sauce, it's reducing, sizzling. You can see all the delicious goodness in there. I'll go ahead and bring you nice and close as I add the sour cream so you can see the deliciousness, because right now it's only me seeing it. As you can see, it's simmering away. As you run the spatula through, you can see the dill. Beautiful. Okay, it's sour cream time. Heat off. hand forward. Keep the handle away from the other hot burners. We're gonna just go ahead, get the sour cream in here. Beautiful. Get as much of that as you can. You don't want to lose any of it. And then just incorporate it. It's gonna be a white creamy sauce. It's gonna have some of the color from the schnitzel cooking in the pan. All right. And then we're gonna go back to heat on medium-low, just to make sure that we get it fully warmed, get the sour cream to completely break down in the chicken stock, and just have a beautiful gravy ready to go. Two important details when you're working with a sauce. Number one is taste. So have a spoon at the ready. If you need to adjust, now's the time to do it. I'm not gonna add any salt because I wanna just leave the plate perfect, let people season themselves. I am gonna add a little black pepper though. Even though it's a white sauce, with all of the dill and the bits in there, I just want it to pop and just have a little bit more pizzazz. But the other thing that you want to look for is it thick enough? So I'm intentionally leaving this a little too thin. So if I serve that to you on your plate, it's gonna run everywhere and it's gonna be like chicken stock on steroids, right? So what you do, if this happens to you, is keep your temperature on low, put together 1 teaspoon of cornstarch with 1 teaspoon of water, cold water, then bring your temperature back up a little bit and incorporate. And within seconds, the cornstarch starts to thicken. So using the cornstarch is called a slurry. Let me show you this now. Now look, that's a sauce. That took 30 seconds. Okay, so there's a lot of activity going on outside. We're getting ready for our own little personal Oktoberfest here in the neighborhood. So we've got the schnitzel, got the mashed potatoes, got this gorgeous sauerkraut that's been cooked with bacon and the whites of the green onions. I'm using a plate that actually has some color in it. You're normally not supposed to put food on anything other than white plates unless it's white food, but this is very light food. I've obviously got my sauce, the green onion tops, and a little bit of bacon, because that's how they did it in Munich, and hey, you know what? Learn from the best, right? So we're gonna go ahead, get a nice old scoop of potatoes going over here. Gorgeous. As a kid, we used to cover them in butter. I'm not doing that. I'm gonna honor what I saw in Munich. I'm gonna use tongs for the sauerkraut, because I want to make sure I pull off as much of the excess water as I can. That liquid's delicious for cooking. It's not necessarily delicious when it gets all over the rest of your plate. All right, great. And we're just gonna come back here, grab these two pretty little ones. Beautiful. And then just drop some gravy on there. Oh yeah. Here's the cool part. When you start it at the top, you just let it go wherever it wants to go. That's it right there. Now, I'm gonna eat. So don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Remember, this is viewer's choice all season, so this happened to be the one everybody wanted. If yours didn't make it, it's time to start voting again. We're gonna ask you in a couple of weeks. Obviously, this is a fantastic Oktoberfest meal. Please enjoy this season. It's gonna be awesome. Halloween's coming up. There's gonna be tons of fun. Be safe, have fun, and remember, it's your turn. Are you ready?